I think I need to take the rest of the day off to reflect. This is the kind of story that changes a person. Gynecologists, what is the nastiest thing you have experienced while working? Okay, here you go. I was doing clinicals at a large, inner-city clinic attached to a hospital. The first patient of the day was a woman in her 50s who had recently had a vaginectomy to try and combat vaginal cancer. They had gone and removed her entire vagina. I've never seen anything like it. After we removed the packing, it was just a huge, gaping, dripping maw, and between her legs there was absolutely nothing left of her female anatomy. The worst part was how terrible she felt about the whole thing. She refused to let her husband see anything, and was in tears the entire time, telling him he should go, she doesn't deserve to have him now. For the most part he just cried, attempted to hold her hand, and told her he loved her and could never leave. My wife's an OB/GYN. The worst case she related to me was a female inmate that had such a bad case of genital warts that it was impossible to discern any specific anatomical structures. It was just a giant mass of warts and infected discharge. She was also 10 weeks pregnant and still sexually active. I was chaperoning a procedure my doctor was doing on a woman. She had an ingrown hair that had turned into a cyst on her labia. This doctor wasn't particularly good at cyst extractions and busted the sac. It sprayed in his face. I was retching and trying to console the poor woman at the same time. She was crippled with embarrassment. Friend of mine in judo class did some of his GYN rounds at a local homeless shelter clinic type deal. He'd routinely horrify me at practice. Worst situation he was in was this homeless woman who had a rainbow of colors coming out of her vagina. Each color distinct. Didn't smell good. He didn't know what the hell to make out of it, so he called in his preceptor, who was equally baffled. They ran some tests on her, and it turned out she had something like a dozen simultaneous infections of her cooch. A passed out prostitute was brought to our ER via EMS. We needed to put a catheter in her. When we opened her legs, we saw a flash of green in her vagina. Turned out to be a bankroll of mostly 1s, 5s, 10s and a few 20s. I stopped carry a lot of cash now. Think about this the next time you give your kids lunch money for school. You truly never know where it has been. Med student here, and I haven't done my OB/GYN rotation yet, so I'm sure there is far worse to come. But during a placement at a general practice clinic, I did see one woman a week after she had given birth. She'd had an episiotomy, a cut from the vagina towards the anus to prevent tearing during the birth, which had become infected. It looked, and apparently was, excruciatingly painful. Edit: no, an episiotomy is not cutting the taint until the vagina and anus are just one big gaping hole. It is a cut in the posterior wall of the vagina, either in the direction of the anus, or off to the side, basically just to widen the vaginal opening to aid the passage of the baby if there's a risk of tearing. This will probably get buried, but my father and mother are both OB/GYN physicians and have been practicing for 30+ years each. My mother describes her worst experience was a patient who left a tampon in during month 1. During month 2 she put another tampon in. During month 3 she put yet another one in. My mom has a pretty strong stomach, but she gagged as she pulled it out. The whole office stunk terribly, she said. My father's experience is not really nasty but pretty terrible. My dad is on call and is called in to stitch up this girl, 16 years old and goes to a rival high school of mine. He spends 2 hours or so, I guess that's a long time? I don't know really, stitching her up from her belly button to her anus. Somewhere along the line he notices that she was pregnant. After he is done, the father of the girl was there and my dad just says, "Where is the baby?" Father freaks out and screams at my father. "WTF are you talking about 7!2 My daughter isn't pregnant, scream scream scream." Cops go to the girl's house and find the baby in the closet with a sock in its mouth. I freaks out, asks my dad what he should do. My dad just says, "Get a lawyer." The girl got off too. Future OB/GYN here. One of the worst images that has stuck with me is a young woman with genital warts. Not like 1 or 2. Thousands. They covered her entire external genitalia, including her labia, anus, and surrounding skin 2 to 3 centimeters in all directions. Cryotherapy had failed, and she required laser excision. For self-study, type genital warts into Google Images. Condoms, people. Condoms. Edit: sometimes I can be wordy. P.S. I'll try to keep my account active so that in a few years, I can be the one OB/GYN on Reddit. Not disgusting but relevant to OBS and Gyna. And hilarious, had a lecture from an obs and gyna guy the other day. Apparently he had a patient with an IUD who got pregnant. They couldn't easily remove it, so they left it in, rather than accidentally abort the fetus. 9 months later he does the cesarean and the baby comes out holding the IUD. As a medical student on my OB/GYN rotation, I was sent to see a consult in the emergency room of a teenage girl with parts coming out of her vagina. Get to the emergency room to the private exam room. Girl is sitting there with her boyfriend and a bucket. Look inside the bucket to see a 4 to 5 month fetus dead in a pool of effluents that was spontaneously aborted. Dr. Spontaneous abortion with a fetus in a bucket. My wife isn't a gyna, but she performed PAPs as an NP. One patient came in claiming her crotch reeked. She claimed the smell got worse and worse over the past week or so. My wife had a look, used a speculum, and then with forceps fished out a tampon with them. Evidently the woman had socks towards the end of her period and forgot she had a tampon in. My wife said it was the most awful odor she ever smelled. Keep in mind that part of her schooling required her to play around with a cadaver her university had for over 30 years. Dr. Woman's puss smelled worse than a dead body. When my husband was an intern on a public hospital here in Brazil, he told me about 2 nasty cases. 1. A woman walks in complaining of a foul smell on her vagina. Upon closer inspection, the doctor pulls out not 1, but 3 condoms that were lost in there. She said that the last time her boyfriend had lost a condom inside her had been about a month before. 2. Same complaint, foul smell. Doctor examines and finds pieces of raw rotten beef. The lady explained that she left a piece of steak in there for about a week so she would cook it to her boyfriend and they would be together forever. And that was when I lost my faith in mankind. A family friend, we'll call her Tracy, is a doc, and has a story similar to yours. Tracy was doing an ER rotation while still in school, and an obese woman came in complaining of chest pain. I'm sure you can see where this is going. It turns out that the woman had part of a sandwich up under her breast, and it had been sitting there for so long that maggots had been born there, and were beginning to eat their way into her flesh. I worked as a medical assistant in a gyno office, and the worst patient we ever had was actually really sad. She clearly hadn't bathed in about a week and her underwear were stained. She claimed she was having trouble getting pregnant and had a bunch of eggs frozen and wanted a pelvic exam. The smell when she took her pants off was horrific. I'm fairly certain she had mental problems because she proceeded to tell me that she knew how to kill a man and get away with it and could help me out if I ever needed it. Then there was the time I had a 98-year-old patient with severe uterine prolapse. It was horrifying and made me never want to get old. The most interesting thing I ever saw was a patient who was originally developing as a fetus with 2 vaginas, but they ended up fusing together, leaving her with a string of flesh that divided her vagina into 2 sides. She didn't know about it until she was 19, when the doctor had a difficult time putting in the speculum because he stuck it into the side of the string that was smaller. Before that, no one had ever noticed. Dr. Dirty Crazy Lady Vagina, 98-year-old whose uterus was falling out, and a girl with a flesh string dividing her vagina into 2 sections. I'm glad to know that I'm not the only patient med students look at with fascination. Before they took my thyroid, you could see and feel the tumors, so one of the med students heard and tried to get himself rescheduled for my operation, as he had never seen a thyroid cancer. Med students can be weird. I was nice enough to let him feel my neck up, hee. In keeping faith with GYN theme, I've had multiple med students sit in on my appointments to hear the symptoms of endometriosis. One girl was brave enough once to watch me get an intravaginal ultrasound, which is where they stick a long version of the camera thing up your cooch, kind of painful on a good day, but I was in ER for ruptured cysts, made it 10x worse. The last time I encountered a med student, in her residency, was over Christmas. I had a kidney stone that they couldn't pick up on the ultrasound. The young woman was very nice in asking if she could run a second set of ultrasounds so she could get practice in looking at the liver/kidney area. She was really great with not trying to bruise me like the first tech did. If you ever feel offended by a med student, just remember you're just as much their teacher as their doctor is. They're still learning. You know, I think there's something wrong with me. It's 4 in the morning, and I'm doing a Google image search to look at fricked up vaginas. Think I'm just really curious if it's like a deep green, or like a bright neon green or something. Or, like, white, but with a twinge of green in it. I should just go the frick to sleep, probably, shouldn't I? My husband and I had sex about 2 weeks after delivery of my second. I probably did the coercion, not the other way around. After being so huge and uncomfortable for so long, I was so ready to be back in the saddle. I didn't tear or have any drugs with my second though. It was completely different from my first. We waited at least 7 weeks with my first and even then took things very slow. I did have small stitches with her and my general recovery from her birth was awful. Dr. Some women do choose/want to have socks sooner. They're not always coerced. What kind of asshole expects socks from a woman who just squeezed out a baby? After my son was born, I was like, hell no, I ain't going near all that until it heals up. It seems like guys could deal with some self-service while things go back to normal, but are there guys that are really so socks crazy? I was so busy/tired that was really the last thing on my mind. Also, I am really sorry that happened to you. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more videos. Click the right box for the Radio TTS playlist and let us know what the next video should be about.